Hi, my name's Nikita Lambert, and welcome to How Women Contribute to the System That Socializes Little Boys to Grow Up into the Men They Hate. So, since we're going to be talking about how we contribute to the system that socializes little boys to grow into men we hate, I thought it would be pertinent and helpful to identify three things we really hate about a lot of adult men. Number one being the general lack of compassion, like the lack of awareness, the lack of compassion, the lack of care. It's like there's an inability to place yourselves or themselves in our shoes. Also, number two, fragile masculinity. And that we could talk about for days and days and days. And then lastly, weaponized incompetence. So we're going to look at these things and then take it apart bit by bit. I always like to establish a common ground, a common language. So let's look at this definition of compassion. Compassion, as defined by Merriam-Webster, is sympathetic consciousness of others' distress together with a desire to alleviate it. So there's a sympathetic consciousness that has to be present in order for there to be compassion. And I circled the word consciousness because they have to be aware. They have to be aware of what's even going on before they can desire to alleviate it. So let's take a look here. It starts off with women not talking about our struggles. We'll dive into that. If we don't talk about our struggles, boys will not know what they are. They're just thinking everything's fine. Grandma takes care of everything. Mommy always takes care of me. Everything's always fine. She's always ready to dance and party and make dinner. She's always ready to clean up after me. She just makes it happen no matter what's going on. Mom's so strong. Mom's so strong. Because they don't know. They don't know if we're not talking about it. If they don't know, then they're not going to care. How can you really care about something that you're not really sure is going on? That is how even the civil rights movement, right? Back in the 60s when things started being televised, when it was televised, that kind of jolted America awake. When they saw hoses being turned on children, that's when it's like, whoa, I'm now aware, I'm conscious, I now care. And then if they don't care about the struggle, they're going to grow up into men who still don't care, and they're going to minimize the struggle. And why wouldn't they minimize their struggle? Their mom minimized the struggle. It's okay, sweetie. I'll just take care of it. This is what being a mom is. It's okay, sweetheart. Grandma's got you. Oh, I'm a teacher. I can do all things all the time. Like if we are minimizing our struggles and keeping it from boys their whole lives, they're going to grow up to be husbands who are like, don't be dramatic. Or, oh, it's fine. Oh, you're always sick. Oh, you're always tired. You're going to be fine. And not care to lift a finger because they don't know. And if these men are minimizing our struggle, that kind of, in a way, gaslights us to keep not talking about our struggles. If we're not supported by the men that are walking around and surrounding us, if we're not supported, we're not going to feel like we could talk about it. We're going to feel like we're complaining. We're going to feel like we're weak or like we're coming across as incompetent or, well, I decided to have these kids, or I decided to bring these kids into my life, whether it's through like adoption or you're being an auntie or a babysitter or something like that. So I'm not going to talk about it. Let me just handle it. Let me just do it. And that restarts the cycle. We're not talking about the struggle, so the boys don't know about the struggle. So they don't care about the struggles. So they grow into men who don't know and don't care, and they're going to minimize it, which makes us feel like there's no place for us to talk about the struggle. So we don't talk about the struggle. So the boys don't know about the struggle. And you see how it just goes on and on and on, and it contributes to this system that is not helping anyone. Because if we are not well, then we can't show up as the partners that we desire to be. We can't show up as the friends, as the moms, as the grandma, as whoever, as ourselves, as our genuine selves. And society struggles when the women are not doing well. And then we have what's happening now, which is this mass male epidemic, the loneliness epidemic, and the 4B movement, because we are finally waking up and saying enough is enough, and I'm not doing this. Okay, so here it is on the large screen in case any of you wanted to take a screenshot or something, but we're going to dive into specifically what some of these struggles are. Number one, menstruation. Oh my God, not a period. Yes, a period. Teach your little boys that you have one or that other people have one and what that means for you, for your mood, for your energy levels. As long as it's, age appropriate language. And by age appropriate, I don't mean like detail or whatever. I just mean vocabulary that they can understand. It it wasn't until after I moved out on my own that my husband and I got separated that I actually explained to my son what it means for me and for him when I am menstruating. He knew that it happened before because anyone who has a small child knows they follow you everywhere all the time. So you kind of can't get around it. But I had to actually explain since it was just me and I didn't have someone else to kind of help offset that burden of getting everything done, doing bath time and bedtime and dinner time and entertainment and all the things. I didn't have anyone that I could play tag team with that I had to sit down and explain. And I wasn't sure if I was going to at first, but then I thought, I'll be darned if in my own house the patriarchy will reign. When I am tired, and you're gonna know. And this is valid. And so I brought up the Google screen, like the diagram of, the reproductive organs and everything, and just talked about this is what's happening. And then it has to come out. And that is very, very tiring. Not a whole 7 days, like not the whole time, but for the first like 3 days, I am just tired. Can you imagine? And he was like, of course, oh my gosh, are you okay? I'm like, I am okay. I just need you to be gentle with me. I just need you to be patient with me. I need you to understand that I'm doing the best I can. And it's not forever, but it happens. And I need you to just be patient. Okay. Like I'll be back up and running. How would you feel if all of that was just draining from you? Do you think that would feel nice, or you would need a minute to lay down, And then even comparing it in a way that they can understand. Like when you're sick, when you're tired, when you're not feeling well, do I ask you to take your own socks to the hamper? No. Do I ask you to go get your food, your own drink, your own water off the counter? No, I get it for you because I know you're not feeling well. We are a team. I would just appreciate if you understand when I'm not feeling well. And that doesn't mean he gets neglected, right? There is still food. There is still drink. There is still bath. There is still cuddles. There's still attention. We're still getting stuff done. The world doesn't stop. I'm still going to work. I'm still taking him to school. But just to understand that there's a little more patience. And I just realized, like, why do I feel ashamed? Why do I feel awkward? Like I shouldn't talk to him about this. If he doesn't know, how can he care? Why would he extend more grace or patience if he doesn't understand what it is that I'm going through? And so, through explaining that, he's able to have so much more compassion. Now, on top of that, talking about pregnancy. Now, I'm not pregnant and I never want to be pregnant ever, ever again in my life. But I know he's going to come across people who are pregnant. And I want him to be able to have compassion on people who are expecting, to know what a toll that takes on someone's life. But again, what about this is not appropriate? It's just like teaching someone about an elbow or a nose or a runny nose. It's just life. We didn't talk about the whole conception, but when wanting to know, like, where does the baby go and how does it come out? I went from the uterus diagram to a diagram of baby in utero. And I was like, isn't that so cool? This is the same body part that was just over there. You see how it stretches? You see that line? Isn't that amazing? Isn't the body amazing how it can stretch and the baby could be in there? And then he was like, well, how does it come out? And I said, well, look, do you see anywhere in this diagram where it could come out? And he looked for a while and his eyes got wide and he pointed to the cervix at the very bottom and he's like, there? And I said, yeah. And he was like, I said, I know, but the body is amazing and, this or that. And he's like, does it hurt? I said, oh, very much. but it's okay and it's all with a purpose. And, I'm fine. And I might have talked, I think I briefly talked about C-sections. Like sometimes things are a bit challenging and there could be this, but that's also very difficult. And so whenever you see someone who has a baby in their belly, do just be extra sweet to them and extra helpful because it's hard. It's hard growing a baby. And I explained that. And he's like, why can't I have a sibling? It's hard. It was hard work for me. I said, some people love it, but it was hard for me. We cannot hide our stories. It is as awkward and as shameful as we make it. But when we allow the patriarchy and the powers that be to make us feel like these are bad words, dirty words, inappropriate, that's how they grow up to be men who don't know the difference in all the parts. When we are not intentional to share our stories and our experiences, this is how they grow up to be the men that we see on different platforms who are just so surprised when the display is set up and the women attach like TENS units to them, to their abdomen, and they crank up the numbers and it's supposed to be a period simulation. And the men are like, how do you guys go to work like this? And it's like, maybe if your mother, the other women around you would have been shown a little more compassion, maybe if they felt like they had room to share and be honest, if you saw them, if you saw them had to stop to catch their breath while they were carrying the groceries in, or leaned over the counter and was honest with you about how their cramps were taking them out instead of just trying to power through, that you wouldn't be so surprised. And perhaps you never even would have agreed to this simulation anyway, because you would have known it was torturous. And then, of course, you see all the women in the comments who are like, that's not even the trips to the bathroom. That's not even the nausea. That's not even the migraine. Just all these other things that men just seem so unaware of. A lot of them, obviously, not all men, but enough for this to be such a big topic and issue. Then next, fatigue, sickness. There is so much medical information that is out that has nothing to do with the woman's body, the woman's lived experience. It was not until pretty recently that women were even used in medical research studies. So, like dietary needs, how much rest is needed, how much water, and then even at different parts, different phases of our cycles. It did not consider us. It did not consider us. It is so male centered. And when we don't say, I'm tired, I need a break, and allow that to be valid, allow that to be a full stop, then again, going back to the flow chart, they don't know, so they don't even care. And then they grow up and they minimize the struggle of the women around them because their moms and their grandmas and their teachers never use that as an excuse. Don't just use that as an excuse. Just get up. Don't be so lazy. And so then we feel like we have to stay suppressed, and the cycle just keeps going. Just be honest. Just be honest. Inform them. If we don't, they continue to grow into people who lack that compassion, the consciousness of what's going on with a desire to want to alleviate it. If we, as their friends, as their cousins, as their aunts, as their moms, as their grandmothers, as their teachers, are not honest about, like, I'm just moving a little slower today. It doesn't mean that we have to say no to everything. It doesn't mean that we just don't do anything. But we can move slow. Why can't we move slower? Why can't we say some things will have to get pushed off to tomorrow and that be okay? And say, hey, I allow you that space. I need it allowed for me. And then we're just different in a lot of ways, hormonally, biologically, just all the things. Not to mention that there are so many studies. You can go look for them yourself, but there are so many studies that talk about how the happiness and the quality of life that a mother has is so strongly correlated to the well-being of the child. But we're so focused on the well-being of the child and the well-being of their father and the well-being of everyone else around us that we often forget ourselves and put ourselves in the back. And we can show up and smile, but if we're not really happy, if we're not joyful, if we're not free, if we're not authentic, then that becomes the norm and the expectation that just because someone chooses to place themselves in a caregiver role, that they must absolutely forget themselves. That's what my mom did. She's such a strong woman. She's such a strong woman. Nobody makes women like our grandmas anymore. Why is that the standard? These women who were not allowed to open businesses in their names, the women who could not have bank accounts until late in life, the women who are still experiencing a wage gap, the women who are still suffering because of choices being made on behalf of their bodies. Why is that the standard again? But our silence and our compliance allows that to remain the norm. And if it remains the norm, they will grow up into men who expect that to remain the norm, because that's the norm. That's just what women do, right? That's just what they do. And then when we don't want to comply, when we push back, when we're tired, when we're angry, when we are livid that we haven't been shown compassion, we're the hysterical ones. We're unreasonable, we're entitled, we're selfish, we're, you name it. You name it. We're the crazy ones for expecting compassion because we're going against the grain. But it's because it was never asked for from the very beginning. So their expectations are for it to continue being the exact same way they see it everywhere else. So to sum all of that up, share your story, share your struggle. Moving on to the next point, which is fragile masculinity. What a big umbrella. We're going to talk about all these subpoints later, but I broke that down into 3 pillars as well, which is it comes from a lack of emotional intelligence on the boy's part, lack of exposure to powerful femininity and a wide variety of experiences and interests, and an overexposure to masculinity just for masculinity's sake. The whole, a boy needs a man around. He needs a man around to teach him how to be a man. We're going to talk about all of that. So getting started with emotional intelligence. Okay, as I stated earlier, communication begins with a shared language. A lot of men don't even have the language to talk about their emotions. You'll see here the emotions wheel. That is an emotions wheel, a feeling wheel. Look at how many feelings there are. So many. I didn't count them, but so many that are listed there. And a lot of times, if you ask a man how he feels, and again, please spare me the whataboutism and the not all men, but a lot of modes for them are happy, mad, and fine. Like, it's a good day, I'm really upset, I'm angry, or I'm fine, I'm chill. It's not that big a deal. Notice sadness is not even there. And that is because a lot of times, and this is cited several places, as I've also seen it, any negative emotion, frustration, disappointment, sadness, is just mad. I'm mad. I'm so mad. Because sadness is weak. Tears are weak. I've seen in preschool grown women telling 1 and 2-year-olds not to cry. Do you know how that feels? You do, women. You know how it feels to be told that you're not feeling what you're feeling. And it's stifling, it's angry, it's stressful, especially when you're young. You're young. You come from being an infant, and the way you communicate is crying. Now you're 2 years old, you're crying, you're literally trying to still get mastery of your language. And you think, you're learning about these feelings, but you're being told you can't feel that and you can't express it that way. And the way that you've been expressing the last year and a half crying, that's not going to work anymore either. Do you know how stressful it is to be robbed of language, to be robbed of communication and feel like you're put in a box? It's extremely stressful and it's traumatizing, especially for a young child. Okay. And young children can experience toxic stress. This can happen from the cry it out method. It can happen from abuse happening in the household, poverty, unsafe conditions, all these things. But here's what Psych Central says about toxic stress. The toxic stress response. This can occur after severe and prolonged adversity, such as abuse, chronic neglect, parental substance use disorder or mental illness, or severe poverty, without the loving support of an adult. This type of prolonged stress exposure disrupts a child's brain development and increases the risk for stress-related disease and long-term cognitive impairment, even well into the adult years. And the emphasis, the highlighting, that is added by me. And so I highlighted chronic neglect because when you're presenting your needs to someone and your emotions and you're just being dismissed, that's neglectful. That's neglectful. I'm bringing you my problem. I'm bringing you my sadness. I'm bringing you my upset. And you're telling me to be quiet, to toughen up. Girls don't like to see you cry, as if that should be a 2 to 5 year old's concern at all. That is stressful. And so I know a lot of us will say, like, it's like men's brains don't work. They're not thinking. What's wrong with them? They're incapable. They're blah, 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 blah. This literally says it disrupts their brain development. It results in long-term cognitive impairment. So yeah, in a way, their brains are broken. And who broke them? Who broke them? Everyone's saying the things like this. Big boys don't cry, be tough. You don't want the girls to see you cry. Girls don't like boys who cry. You're okay, walk it off. Clearly, there are tears on their face, or they're frustrated, or they're wanting to throw things. And that's all communication that we need to be helping them put words to and find appropriate ways to express themselves. But instead, we shove it down, we stifle it, and then everyone's surprised and they're to blame when they're punching holes in walls or people. They're just quitting. They're quitting life. Like, but who gave them the tools? We've got to stop stifling boys' emotions. Sensitivity is not a flaw, it's not a character flaw. Would you rather them be overly calloused and heartless? Oh, that's what happened. That's what happened. And how did they get there? Listen, this is not the video to talk about how we're going to help the grown men walking around. That's above me. That's out of my hands. But we can help our little boys to grow up. We've got to stop being so concerned that they are sensitive, that they can feel things, that we'd rather them be calloused and heartless. The math is not mathing. And on that note, I would like to invite my guest speaker, revolutionary Angela Davis, and this is what she has to say on the matter. It doesn't make any sense at all. Thank you, a woman of few yet powerful words. It doesn't make any sense at all. Their feelings are valid. I should not have as many grown men in my circle telling me how relieved they are that I allow them to feel their feelings, that they come to me and say, oh, I know I shouldn't be sad. Like, I just need to push through. And I'm like, sad is a valid emotion. If it wasn't, why does everybody feel it? If you weren't supposed to cry, why do you have tear ducts? You're making yourself sick. And then making it everybody else's problem, and in the meanwhile, we all got to deal with it. And then you rope some poor kind-hearted lady into loving you, and then you don't know what to do with her. And yes, as anyone with trauma, we grow up, we have to take responsibility, but let's talk about this pipeline and how it happens so we can do something different. There was an instance, because I encouraged my son to feel all the feelings. He was at swim practice and he was upset about something, I can't remember, and he was crying, and one of the coaches, a woman, said, oh, come on, there's no crying at swim. And he looked at me and I looked at him, and I didn't say anything. And luckily, when that one coach walked away, another coach was like, it's okay. I think towards the end of the interaction, I said something like, I'm sure he'll be fine after he gets the chance to feel his feelings. But it took me a while to gather myself, because that's such a normal societal rhetoric, and I didn't kind of want to overstep. But he looked at me and I looked at him, and I felt so bad. So a few days later, I followed up with him and I was like, hey, you remember when this happened? He's like, yeah, and you didn't even say anything. He was 5. My little heart broke. I was supposed to protect him. And I told him that I was sorry and that I felt nervous in the moment, and but that it is fine, and that it is okay for him to cry, even at swim. It's okay for him to cry anywhere. You know why? Because he was 5, and 5-year-olds can cry. 5-year-olds can. There's nothing that serious in my little boy's life that he can't cry somewhere. It's not that serious. more serious than him learning healthy expression. Not only do we need to give them vocabulary and help them to realize that their own emotions are normal and valid and acceptable, but we need to help them to normalize the emotions of others and not laugh and not say, oh, he's weak. Oh, that's a girl. Oh, that's lame. Like, for what? And maybe even a little check, like, excuse me, sir, was I laughing at you when you cried because you spilled your ice cream? Would you have liked that? Would you have liked if I laughed and pointed when you did that? Okay, then let's respect. Let's respect their process. You know, they want to be big and bad, give it back a little bit. Help them to understand, to feel, to have that compassion, like, oh, snap, you've been sad. You've been disappointed. You felt embarrassment. Do you want to be the one who makes someone else feel that way? Help them be a little, like, hold them a little more accountable, okay? Because it's not enough just for moms to say it's okay, but there needs to be a safe space among the boys as peers as well. I got this information from the Anxiety and Depression Association of America that nearly 1 in 10 men experience depression or anxiety, but less than half will receive treatment. And more than 4 times as many men as women die by unaliving themselves every year. And that could very much be attributed and correlated to the fact that there's not this safe space for them to have conversations. When you're just feeling like your feelings are wrong, your actions are wrong, you can't perform as a man's supposed to perform, and you can't even talk about how that feels, what are you supposed to do except leave? Or again, make it everybody else's problem. If you're not going to help me carry on this facade that I am the most manly man and I am productive, then you are the problem and you need to be dealt with. So either you can go or I'm going to help you. And that's problematic. But how did we get here? By not giving them the space that is needed and required. So, with that, on top of that, exposing them to different emotions, we need to expose them to powerful, boisterous, vocal, intelligent, creative, in charge girls and women with authority, not only in title and professionally, but yes, those. Can they have a woman pediatrician? I don't know, a woman auto mechanic, but just girls and women with strong opinions and points of view. Maybe a little pushback to them. And when they have these encounters with these little girls with points of view, help them to respect their opinion. Like, she can be smart, she can be creative. It's okay. You can learn from her the same way she can learn from you. That there's this like mutual respect and kind of running with, and not this like she's good for a girl. She's creative for a girl. She's strong for a girl. None of that. Bring the girls in on the play dates so that they can be exposed to them and know that girls and women are people. People with real feelings and real points of view and just different. And people that you can learn from. There needs to be that exposure. And again, even in a professional setting, are they seeing that women can be scientists? Are they seeing that women can do construction? Are they seeing that women can be all of these things? Show them, point it out, point it out. So for them, it is normal. It's not anything that's different, but they need that exposure to see. I forgot to say, stop competing with little girls and young women. Stop it. Stop it. Whether it's their classmates or a romantic interest or somebody young, like at your job, a colleague, what is all this cattiness and this competition? It's weird. It's weird. Stop it. Men have like the good old boys club, the men's club, and we get the stigma of women are catty. So they're looking out for each other. They let each other in the inner rooms, the cigar lounge, all of this. And then we're snarky and laughing and picking apart young women that could be learning from us or a peer that we could partner with to climb the ladder. But when we're willing to sell them out or pick them apart so we look like the golden girl, a pick me, if you will, the men can come in and divide. It just further perpetuates this idea that women can't get along, that we can't be unified and strong. So stop that. It's not cute. Sometimes it seems oddly, faintly incestuous, along with exposure to powerful femininity. Allow boys to have exposure to a wide range of hobbies, okay? That they can cook, that they can clean, that they can dance, that they can paint, and their worth is not measured by how high they can jump or kick a ball, or how far they can throw and how much they can lift and all those things like that. And let's normalize the fact that sometimes it's just a game. Just like a picture is just a picture and a song is just a song. Like it can get as deep or as shallow as we need it to be, but it's not worth concussions. It's not worth mental breakdowns. And nothing is healthy when a person feels like they're not valuable outside of that. Okay. That goes for women as well, but just boys, especially, that their scope of where their value lies is so narrow, and that so many people obsess over sports and are hyper focused and obsessed with the fact if a boy wants to imagine and play pretend or dance or design anything, that's not okay. That's not healthy. And it's not okay. All right. And that adds to the depression. That adds to the depression. It adds to the anxiety and all of the things that mess up their brain, that have all the grown men walking around and us looking at them like, what is wrong with you? Well, that's what's wrong with them. Their emotions were stolen from them, their hobbies were stolen from them, and their safe spaces were denied. So, yes, don't do that. And you know what else they need to see? Stay with me here. They need to see men getting left. Getting left. That's right. I said it. They need to see men getting left. And why? Because they need to become familiar with this very simple equation, that acting up plus incompetence minus accountability equals getting left. And anybody can get it. This goes for men or for women. Why would you want anybody to remain in a relationship where their partner is acting up, largely incompetent, even if it's just like the emotional things, and they lack accountability? They get defensive, possibly belligerent, gaslighty, manipulative, all of these things. They need to see that. They need to see that if someone is treating them that way, that they have the option to leave, and they need to see that it's normalized, that if they are to act that way, it's normal for them to get left and to not be confused and not victimize themselves. And don't you worry, I factored women into this equation too, because there is an equation for women getting left that's already in place. And so here are some of those factors. And so for women, the acting up often looks like being too opinionated, being too entitled to set opinion, prioritizing our own identity, and fact checking men. And incompetence that could allow for us to get left is our inability to stay in shape after having babies, after aging, after chronic stress and fatigue. The inability to stay in shape. We could get left for that. We knew that a man wanted us to look a certain way when they got with us. So just expect that. Next, our inability to stroke the man's ego, whether that is laughing at all their jokes, praising them for the efforts that they do put in excessively, or, spicy time when it comes to the bedroom. If we're not able to stroke the man's ego, of course he's got to look elsewhere. And then the inability to relax. If you are on any dating app or watch any amount of dating app content, you'll know that a lot of guys just want a woman who doesn't take herself too seriously. Just don't take yourself too seriously. Go with the flow. Why are you so stressed? Why are you so worried about, we're going to get there when we get there? Oh, so I forgot the gift wrap. Oh, it's okay. Just if you can't relax, ladies, then you can get left. And if you cannot be accountable for these things, that you've been acting up, you've been too opinionated, and you don't go with the flow, and you're kind of letting yourself go, you can get left. But that equation's also in place. So that takes me back to this equation that I suggest we start implementing, that when men are acting up and incompetent and they lack the ability to be accountable, they get left. And hopefully, like I said, even though a lot of these men are grown and I don't really know what to do with that, that's not my priority. I'm here for the children, for the babies who didn't ask to be brought into this. Okay, how can we help them is by setting the example, or for them to see if there's a whole generation that grows up and is swapping stories about how their, the men got left, then maybe they would understand that there's a little more on the line, that they just can't act any sort of way, and likewise that they would feel like they can leave, because I know because it's not necessarily just a gender thing. Crazy doesn't care what you identify as. Lack of accountability doesn't necessarily care what you identify as. And so I don't want any of these sweethearted little boys growing up and taking some manipulative, lying woman under their arms, under their wings, and trying to save them, and they're getting taken to task. So I want them to be able to know that it goes both ways. They have every right to leave and not look like the bad guy, and it's always an option that they could get left. Now, we talked about making sure that our boys are exposed to powerful girls who are just so vibrant in their element. Let's talk about how maybe they need to be a little less exposed to some of the toxic masculinity that's out there. So, there is this notion that a boy needs a man. A boy needs a man to show him how to be a man. How many men do you know that you want your boy to grow up to be like? Now, I'm not saying that it can't be helpful, you know? I'm not saying it can't be helpful. It's good to have people who can relate, but then what are they relating to? Are they relating to this experience about how they feel like nobody's there for them? Like, and then what are they telling them about that? And are they going on and on with some of this rhetoric here? Are they like, let's just not pick a man, any man, especially some of the fathers that have been chosen for some of the boys, or not even chosen, but that they've wound up with, because babies come from all sorts of different scenarios. But like, let's just think about that what are we so desperate for these men to teach the boys? Is it compassion? The same men who don't know that there are different holes, the same men who are so surprised that women can go to work with periods after they actually feel it, and so they must have been going their whole lives thinking that women were just exaggerating. The same men that feel like it's weak to say I'm sad. Again, I'm not saying that there's no merit to it. I'm just saying I think we do a disservice sometimes by just handing them over and allowing the cycle to repeat. And it's not that each generation perhaps doesn't get a bit better, a bit, but also, like, just think about it. Just think about it. I do think sometimes we just follow this rhetoric because it seems like it should make sense, but it might not be for everybody's highest good. Have you seen how some of the men interact with the children? And this is not saying that all women are great with children either. However, women are largely able to take care of themselves. It's just not as public that women are saying, I need a man to come cook for me and clean for me and help me with my laundry, and oh man, I was just eating such terrible junk food before I met my man. I met this one guy, or I didn't meet him. I talked with this one guy for all of like 3 minutes on a dating app. And he said he was just so proud of himself. He'd been in therapy and he was really proud. He felt like he'd made some major breakthroughs and was ready to date. And I was like, oh, cool. Well, what are some of the breakthroughs that you're really excited about? And he said the fact that he can now identify and name his emotions, which, yay, love that for you. Love that for you. However, I'm just on another level. I didn't say that. I think I asked like one or two more questions, but he also couldn't carry a conversation. And that's another thing that gets talked about a lot, is that women are just carrying conversations on dating apps, off of dating apps. And it's like, and this, this specimen, this demographic is who you're just saying, like, a boy needs a man. Respectfully, no. Respectfully, not just a man, any man. Respectfully, no. Next, if we want to stop contributing to the system, we have got to stop engaging with weaponized incompetence. Don't do it. Now, here's the thing again, little girls exercise weaponized incompetence as much as little boys do. The only difference is really that little girls get it trained out of them. They get it trained out of them. There's no room for that. We've got to learn to cook. We've got to learn to clean. We've got to learn to sort the laundry. And boys just get treated like mommy's baby, grandma's baby. And it's fine because, oh, well, it's fine because they got to learn to cut the grass. Or, oh, it's fine. They've got basketball practice. Oh, it's so hard. Oh, just a boy. He's just going to eat a lot. He's so tired when he comes home. But that same allowance is not allowed to the girls, and that's the difference. That's where the paths take different turns. And it just turns out to be this monstrosity. If you're not familiar with what weaponized incompetence is, it's basically when someone's like, oh, I don't know how to do that. Oh, that's so hard. Oh, it's confusing. And it's something that they could easily do if they tried, or a quick search could, like, they could figure out how to do it. They just choose not to. They choose not to. And it's that whole thing like, well, if I do it badly, someone else will just do it. And that's very common. And when we allow it to continue without kind of training the boys out of it, it's a form of enabling that grows up to look like a whole other beast. When there's lack of accountability, they just, and this is where you get the phrase like man child from. And people are just always coming to rescue them and fill in the gaps for them. There's a story in the book Boundaries, I think it's by Henry Cloud, and John Townsend. And so there's a story in there where he's meeting with two parents, and I believe their son has a substance abuse problem, or maybe gambles money away or something. And the parents say, our son has a problem. And the doctor says, I think it was, yeah, Dr. Cloud, one of them says, no, your son doesn't have a problem. Your son's life is great. You guys have a problem. You guys have a problem because he asks and his needs get met. You guys are the ones that are stressed. You guys are the ones that are having to deal with this and that, come and rescue him. You need to draw a line. There need to be some more boundaries here. And that's a lot of the times what happens when we allow boys to continue in weaponized incompetence. Then they grow up. And again, it becomes everybody else's problem. So, what can we do? We have got to be very intentional about going against the grain. We have to be intentionally countercultural. We have to look at these things and choose. I'm going to share my story. I'm going to expose him to the different struggles that come with being a girl or a woman. I'm going to make sure that they have play dates with girls. Maybe not just with girls, but is it a mixed group? I'm going to be intentional about teaching him, why do some fabrics not go in the dryer? Or how do you wrap a gift and why the tissue paper is important? How do you make a grocery list and you're going to come to the grocery store with me and know where the produce is and know where the eggs are? What is the wage gap and why should you care? Know that that is a thing that exists. Help them to be passionate. Again, how can they care if they don't even know? I found this book in the local library and I checked it out to read to my son. I don't wear a hijab. I don't even think I know anyone personally who wears one, but I want him to respect all women and their choices and to be educated. I want him to know that you don't just point and laugh at things that are different. To not intentionally go against the pattern set in place with the little boys in our care is to allow them to get swept away with the current of the machine that is raising these boys to grow into the men that we hate. So, in summary, to bring this to a close, we need to raise boys' consciousness, their awareness, and that should in turn raise their compassion, their ability to be compassionate, their ability to identify their own emotions and sympathize with the emotions of others. But what do I know? I've never dismantled a whole patriarchy before. But I do see what's not working, and I have created many, many, many classroom environments year after year with a whole bunch of different children and personalities that function well and help teeny tiny people learn how to manage their emotions and communicate and be friends. And even if they're not friends, to disagree politely and stay away from each other. And that's all we would like men to do with us, is to stay away from us if they can't listen to our words. And that's why we say we would choose the bear. So, anyway, I really hope that you have enjoyed this. Thank you for coming to my lecture on how women contribute to the systems that socialize little boys to grow up into the men that they hate. And if you liked it, I do hope that you will like, comment, share, subscribe, all the things. And let me know in the comments if any of this stood out to you, if you have any questions about anything, or what else we could talk about. Or if you hate my guts, you can tell me that too. But yes,